Bootstrap. It's going to be hosted by Christian Eckenrode. Christian was a student at the very first cohort at Rutgers Coding Bootcamp and was hired full-time to work for an education startup just 3 months into the program. He gained experience working extensively with front and back-end web development technologies, and now he's a teaching assistant at the Rutgers Coding Bootcamp and works full-time for Trilogy as a curriculum engineer, where he builds and maintains all of our curriculum. So without further delay, I'm going to turn this over to Christian, and I expect this is going to be a fantastic presentation.
Cool. All right. What's up, guys? My name is Christian. I'm sure I've met quite a few of you before. So I have a link that I'm going to Slack out. I'm going to put it in the Gitter, and everyone should clone this. It's going to be some of the stuff that we're going to be working on today. Let's see.
Could you Slack out the Gitter link?
Yep, that's in the Gitter right now. So everybody who doesn't already have it open should open up Gitter, and it's the very last thing in that chat. I'll throw it in this chat as well, but we should all be in the Gitter.
Christian, do you want us to fork this or clone it?
You can do either. I'd suggest, in addition to either forking it or cloning it, star it, because after we're done, I'm going to be updating it. So, like that way you'll be able to get like the latest stuff. Like some of it I've like purposely didn't put in there for you to guys like figure out, and I'm going to like add in like answers and stuff afterwards.
Okay, cool.
So I'll give everybody a minute or two on that. Okay, so we'll get started. I'm guessing just about everybody was able to clone that. If not, you can still follow along somewhat. Cool. So I guess like what we're going to be talking about today is just like a basic review of HTML. We're going to talk about some CSS things that maybe got glossed over a little bit in the first week or so. That maybe are still kind of unclear for people. Stuff like positioning, stuff like what do floats do? How does that actually work? How do I get my footer to stick to the bottom of the page? Stuff like that, along with like Bootstrap and like how to feel more comfortable with that. So I have a couple activities. Some of it is going to be 10 RSVP. That's totally fine. And yeah, it's being recorded. Yeah, so I guess like the very first thing, I'm going to share my screen, and then you can either follow along with like your version of the code or just watch the screen. Either way is cool. Cool, does everybody see that? Could use a yes or a no.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah,
Yes.
awesome. So yeah, we're gonna start off super basic. So just bear with me while we're going with that. and then it's gonna feel a lot more advanced pretty quickly. But just because I know that like some people here are maybe in week 1 and some people here are maybe week 20 or more, we're just gonna really start from the beginning and move really quickly. So right here, I just have like a super basic HTML page. If we were to open it in the browser, we see it just says hello world. Nothing surprising about that. I just have a couple quick questions, and anybody can jump in and answer these, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as like we kind of go forward. So does anybody know what doc type means? Like the doc type HTML tag, like what's that for?
Is that to tell the version of HTML you're working on?
Yep, exactly. So basically what that's saying, it's a declaration. It's not like a tag in the same way that like HTML is or head is, but it's telling the browser that we're going to be using HTML5, the latest version of HTML. We could alternatively specify that we want to use like HTML4 here, but this is just saying we're going to be using the latest HTML. And most of the time, you don't actually have to put this like technically, but it's always good to. The reason why I say you don't technically have to a lot of the times is because browsers nowadays are smart enough where when they see this, or even if they don't see this rather, they can kind of like figure out like what version of HTML we're using from like the rest of the page. Can anybody tell me what the head tag is for? Robbie, I think you're on here, right?
Yeah, Chris, that would be definition of your title of the document and the character set definition.
So like in addition to that, like what kind of information seems to go into the head tag then? Is it stuff that shows up on our page?
Page metadata.
Right,
That
exactly.
you don't see on the page.
Exactly.
It's anything you're referencing into the file.
Perfect. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the head tag contains any metadata about our page. So sometimes that metadata comes in the form of, rewind a bit actually. So metadata is just data about data, is kind of what that means. So sometimes that comes in the form of like a link tag saying we're going to be using this CSS. Sometimes that comes in the form of like a script tag. We're going to be using this JavaScript. Other times that comes in the form of a meta tag, which basically specifies any other metadata that any other tag isn't suited for. So like the character set is just saying that, hey, we're going to be using UTF-8. Basically, we're not going to be using any like weird like writing like character sets that aren't like part of like the English like language. Like if we had a website that was like entirely in Japanese, then we might use like a different character set. Again, this is like one of those things that like the browser is usually smart enough to like figure out, but it's good to like be explicit like when we put that. And then lastly, if somebody can let me know about the body, we'll just go on to the next thing because I'm pretty sure you guys know all this. Let's see, a couple of things in the chat.
I guess the body's just a section where you're putting all of your content in your web page.
Exactly, perfect. So yeah, that's basically like, those are the minimum things that we need to have like a functioning like HTML web page. We could like technically just do this and things will still work. This isn't right. The reason why it still works is just because Chrome is smart enough to like see that we're missing tags and kind of give us the missing tags that, you know, we didn't include. But you always want to be like semantically correct in like how you put your tags in, just because not every browser, not everyone's going to be on the latest version of Chrome. You're going to have people that are on IE, you're going to have people that are on like different operating systems where they won't figure that out. So cool. Let's move on to the next one. So now we're going to talk just a little bit about semantic HTML. So basically, this is just like a super disorganized web page. I didn't add any like CSS yet. But really what's more important is like the content inside. So first off, who can tell me like what semantic HTML means and like why do we care about it? Or even just like half that question, like what is semantic HTML?
You're following a standard, an SOP, so other browsers can interpret it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, let's see what's in
It's
the
also
chat.
good for ARIA.
Yes,
For the
exactly.
ARIA thing.
Yes, future proofing for SEO. These are all totally right. So basically what the punctuation used, not totally sure what that means. But basically, so HTML, yes, exactly. So ARIA is like another like newer way to kind of like make our HTML like more accessible and more semantic, but in the context of just like semantic HTML tags. So in addition to like giving our pages presentation, like our tags can have like meaning. So like the header basically set, well, in VS Code it tells you. So like the header basically, it represents introductory content for our web page. You know, a nav kind of represents like a section of the page that, you know, contains links to like other parts of like, you know, the same web page. A section, you know, basically it's just like a generic part of the code that, you know, maybe houses like other sections or like articles inside. And an article is kind of like a self-contained chunk of code or piece of content rather, that kind of could be used all on its own. It doesn't really need the rest of the page. Usually sections and articles will have some kind of like heading tag describing like what they are. Well, what's in the chat? I'm using Visual Studio Code. But anyways, so basically these tags can like describe what's going on our web page in addition to like giving it structure. So it's better for accessibility. So maybe people who are using, you know, who are visiting your site using assistive devices like screen readers, this is going to perform a lot better for them because these screen readers have software that maybe interprets like an article or a section differently than just like a regular like div. And it's also better for SEO because Google likes it when our web pages are accessible because it means that more people can like kind of visit our website. So they'll generally rank you higher in search. And because like semantic tags tell you a little bit about the page and like the content that's on the page, that actually helps out with SEO as well. So some new semantic tags that weren't around like up until very recently include section, article, footer. In a table, we have like a T head, which basically just represents like the top of the table, like the portion with the title. We have a T body, just like the middle of the table, and like a T footer, which is basically just kind of holding like that final row that's gonna summarize like all the data in the table.
So this is HTML5.
Correct, yeah. So most of these tags weren't around in HTML4. Because like I guess at the time nobody really cared about that. But it became apparent that, all right, there's a lot of people visiting like websites either from phones and tablets, and that's another thing is phones and tablets, websites on phones and tablets would perform better if everything is semantically correct, because you saw how Chrome did like that whole, Chrome on the desktop anyway, did that whole thing where like it sort of fixed the HTML page if I took out the HTML element and I took out like the body element. Certain phone browsers won't do that at all. So anything that we can do to make our like page more semantic, more valid, is good for basically anybody who visits it on any device, not just people with like impairments and things like that. I feel like I had some questions with that. We pretty much answered all of them. So we'll go on to the next one, where now we're just going to talk about CSS. Just had to get that part out of the way. And if anybody has any questions, just jump in, interrupt. I may not see it right away if it's in the chat, but I'll totally get to it if I do. So yeah, who can tell me, who can describe to me like what CSS is? Doesn't have to be like a super fancy definition, just like what it is, what it does, and then we'll go into using it.
Well, CSS is used mainly to style the actual paper. Oh, God, to style the boards.
Yeah,
Make them bigger, change the colors, etc.
that's exactly right. So in the chat, I'm seeing cascading style sheets, which is what it stands for. What does the cascading part of CSS actually mean? Does anybody know? Moves down the page. Okay, that's right. Order matters. Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly. So like we can override styles by placing new styles after them. If we include one style sheet and then we include another style sheet in our HTML, the one that comes after takes precedence. That's exactly right. Cool. So now we will, I kind of like, I didn't really know how this was going to go. So I had like a quick challenge, but maybe you guys can like walk me through it actually, and we'll just do it together. So we have like this super basic HTML page, and I promise it's going to like ramp up very quickly. Just some lorem ipsum. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to add CSS code to make all the H1 elements green. And yep, we're linking our style sheet. So what code here what would I type to make all the H1s green?
H1, first curly bracket,
Yep.
and there you go. You put the color, what color you wanted it. It would be
Green.
Yep.
there you go.
Perfect. Awesome. We want to make all the text in the p tags bold. What do we do for that?
Same thing. P, open curly bracket.
So p.
And would you do strong on this one?
That's really close. So the strong tag will make it bold by default in browsers without CSS. But if I wanted to make it bold using CSS, what might
Font weight.
Yeah, so font weight.
Font
That's
weight.
exactly right. Cool. So what might I type for font weight to make it bold?
Bolder.
Let's try that. Yep, so far we're good. So in addition to like, there's like light, medium, bold, bolder for font weight. Font weight can also take like a number. Anything from like 100 to 900 would be like a level of boldness. And sometimes certain fonts don't have like, 100, 200, 300, 400. They might just have like 100, 500, 800, 900. They might have like only a certain number of settings. But like you can also do it numerically too, where 900 is always the boldest. Cool. And then I think there were, okay, cool. We want to make all the spans italic and blue in color, all the span elements. So,
that was textile.
what was that?
Textile and I think
Font
it's
style.
font style. Yeah, he's right. Font style.
Sweet. So I just write italic. It like autofilled it. So we want to make them italic and blue. So what do I do to make the span blue now?
Color colon blue.
Color blue.
Cool. What's the difference between color and background?
Color changes the actual font. Background changes the background.
The highlighting, right?
Exactly. A lot of times I'll be making a shape or something like that. I'll have a div and I'm wondering like why it's invisible. It's because I did color instead of background. Yep, you guys are all right. Cool. So now we want to give the body a yellow background. We kind of just talked about this, but
Background color. The body.
Yep, there it is.
yeah.
Background,
So you could do background color. Background also works by itself.
yellow. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, yellow should work. Yep.
Cool. Looks like SpongeBob. All right. That was that. So now we're going to talk about positioning, where this is like where it starts to get kind of weird. I like wrote some of this a while ago. So I'm trying to like remember like what it actually was. Okay, so the first, okay, so there's different positioning types that we have with CSS. By default, just about actually every element is statically positioned. So I wouldn't even really read what I have up here yet, because that would kind of, you're not going to find like the answer I'm looking for like right there actually. But who can describe me like what static positioning actually means? Like a high level explanation, like how does a static positioned element behave?
Stays in the same position on the page.
That's close. That's I think you might be referring to fixed.
Oh,
Like
you're
if you
right.
scroll and it kind of like keeps with you.
You're correct. Yes,
Okay.
that is.
Yeah, so Julia's totally correct. It flows naturally. So whenever you're like writing a document like in Microsoft Word, like the text, it goes from like top left down to, you know, bottom right. It goes from left to right, top to bottom. So that's kind of how pretty much every element in HTML behaves by default. They're all statically positioned. That's what that means. So the page has this flow from top to bottom, left to right. So if anybody asks you like which elements are static elements, you say all of them, because they are until you change them. So I guess I kind of had like this explanation of the box model here. Some of this was like stuff that I was like drafting out and not like totally done. So that's why it seems like it's kind of like bouncing around a little bit. But statically positioned elements are positioned using the box model. So who can tell me like what the box model is, what properties like go into an element when we're talking about the box model? I'll give you a hint. One of them is margin. Oh, we got 2 people in the chat. Margin, padding, margin, borders. Exactly. That's oh, that's even more right. Perfect. So yeah. So basically every element has content, or even if that content is empty. So like I'm just gonna open this HTML page now. So if I were to type some text into here, when the box model is concerned, or where the box model is concerned, this text or whatever I have inside box red is the content. Padding is, I guess I kind of had this analogy that I like. So imagine your car is an HTML element. You are the content inside the element when you're sitting in your car. Your car's interior is the padding. So padding is kind of like the space in between the content and the like outside of the car or outside of the element, right? Border is the surface of the car. So if I have an element and I give it like a black border, or even if I don't give it a border, it still has one that's like invisible. That's, you know, part of the box model. And then margin is like the space that is around every element, or like the space, if you're in your car, the space that you put between your car and like every other car. Let's see what's in the chat. Yes, that's exactly right. So I'm actually gonna open this now to kind of better illustrate what I mean. I'm only gonna do that one for now. Okay, so we have like this box here. I think when I styled it, yeah, I just gave it a height, but we'll give it like a width as well. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Okay, so how much padding does this box have? We'll say, we'll move all that down and we'll take that out. Well, the answer to how much padding it has is none, because 1, we didn't give it any padding, and 2, when you open up an inspector and you kind of come like all the way down to the bottom, you can see like a representation of the box model for the element you're selecting on the right side here. So when I hover over margin, this is a little bit misleading because this is just kind of like the entire like line that the box takes up, and that'll make more sense in a second. Border, we can't really see it there, but if we did like now we can see it has like a 2-pixel border. And then padding, padding just kind of like makes things like fatter in a way. So like if I did, and then I did, we'll say 20 pixels. That like increased the space between the content and the border here. And when we just do like padding and give it a number, it does that on all sides. But then like we can also do like padding left, padding right if we want to be like specific about like which side that happens on. So that's kind of the box model. We have our content, we have our padding, we have the border, we have the margin. So it's kind of like all that in that order. Does padding change the size of the box? Yes, it does. There's a case where it doesn't do that, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So padding does change the size of the box, which is a little bit misleading because here we said like, you know, we want the height and the width to be 100, but then if I say like padding, you know, 20, it goes from being like, you know, 100 by 100 box to being a, I guess it's 140 by 140 now, because we have 20 pixels of padding here. We have 20 pixels of padding on the right side. You know, add the 100, that's 140, and then the same thing for the other side. So that's, that kind of makes it a little bit confusing sometimes because, you know, we explicitly said, hey, I want this to be 100 by 100, but now it's not. The way that we can make this still be 100 by 100 and still give it padding is using this one property called box sizing. And the value we give it is border box. So what that does is it factors padding into the height and width. So if we say the height is 100 and I want to give it now a padding of 40, you'll watch how the words change. Yeah, because like we gave it some additional padding, but the box didn't actually change. And that's just what border box does. And we'll see that a couple times like later. So like you don't have to like write that down or anything because like it's going to be in some of the other. Does border box have to go after padding? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So if we put it first, we get the exact same effect. If we took it out, it kind of goes back to kind of swelling up on us there. So sometimes I find myself using this quite a bit if I have to like size elements in relation to other elements, which will make a little bit more sense once we get to like the floating part of this, because there's going to be like one point where we want like this one div to take up 20% of the page and we want another div to take up like 80% of the page. Because each one of those like divs has like their own padding and their own like border, 80% of like, you know, the page, like they go on to like the next line still, because even though I'm saying I only want it to be like 80% of the page, it's actually more because of its padding. If that seems kind of abstract now, don't worry about it, because like I kind of jumped ahead a little bit because of the question, and we are gonna get to that. But yeah,
Chris,
that's yes.
correct me if I'm wrong. Can you like globally define box sizing for the whole page?
Yeah. So like you can do it's a great question. So you can just do this. So the star means everything, and then we can just do box sizing, border box. So if you do that, literally anything you define afterwards, or even just like things that come built in that you're not actually setting any styles for, they're all going to be sized border box. So that was an awesome question. What border box doesn't, so border box factors in the padding and it factors in like the border. It doesn't factor in the margin because like the margin is like outside, which is what we're gonna play with now. So margin doesn't actually work the way that you would think it would work right away anyway. So let's see. Let me put the blue box back. Okay, cool. So I have a red box and I have a blue box. What would I do if I wanted to move the red box, we'll say 400 pixels to the right? Like what margin would I give it to make it do that? So I want the red box, whoops. Yep, so margin left. And if I want to, yep, that's exactly right. I'm just gonna copy and paste that. Awesome. So that works as expected, right? So margin is putting 400 pixels from the left side of this element here. So it's putting almost like this invisible like force field here. You know, you're driving in your car and you're like, I want to put like 20 feet from me in the other car. That's like margin kind of. What do I do now if I want to move it down? We'll say I want to move it down 300 pixels so that it comes down below the blue box. What might I do then?
Margin top 300 pixels.
Okay, and that should move it down below the blue box. Nope. Well, yes and no. So that's kind of weird that just happened right there, right? Because why did the red box move the blue box? Like that's kind of strange. Like we didn't actually want it to do that. Anybody have any guess? Let's see.
Because it comes after in the HTML.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more so it's more so a behavior of I
Cascading.
guess every type of element does it, but it's more so like a block element thing.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it just cascading?
Let's
Is it
take a
because
look
they're not displayed as inline blocks yet?
not so much. Let's see.
This is something I understand, but don't know how
Yeah.
to explain. I hate margin.
There we go. Okay. So now as we're highlighting the like the margin like property of this box here, we see that it's almost like this big wall, right? And it's like almost taking up like the entire page, and it's not the red box that's pushing the blue box down. It's like that wall of margin that's doing it. So what's kind of interesting is, say like we take out the fixed width of the box there. Let's still make the blue box like that. Okay. Why is that like that? Let's take that out. Yeah, so I mean, it basically this makes sense. Like if you saw this and it's like, you're like, yeah, of course it's gonna like push the blue box down. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to get at with that is it's almost like a rule in CSS where if the element is a block level element, like most elements in HTML are, they can't really like pass each other like vertically. There's almost like this invisible like force field that's like, no, I need to take up my own line. I can't be on the same line as this other block no matter what. And there's like ways to get around that, but by default, that's like how things are. They all want to live on their own line. Let's see. Whoops. Yeah, hate margin too. So Yeah, that's pretty much everything we talked about there. So we're going to talk about like how to like get around that and how to like actually make like how to make it so that you can have like an element like past another element. But for now, just kind of consider the rule is elements for the most part want to live on their own line. And then we'll clarify in the next one. Cool. One way of getting around this is using floats, which everybody hates, I feel like. But let's take a look here. Right in my mind, yes. Yeah, I kind of already made this already, so I'm just gonna like unmake this super quick. So floats are one way of getting elements to like live on the same line. Yeah, we'll just do that. I kind of want to keep the colors, but I'm just gonna delete all this so that it maybe makes more sense if I just start from scratch. Okay, so I guess what I want to do is using floats, I want to make like a nav bar, and this nav bar has like links that live on the same line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an unordered list, and it's going to have a couple of LIs, we'll say 3. And we'll just say option 1, option 2, option 3. So if we don't add any CSS to that, these are still block level elements. And we know that because if we gave the LIs a border, we can see that they extend the entire line. That's why they're not like on the same line. They want to live on their own lines, right? So what we'll have to do for that is we're actually going to float these. So what we'll do is we'll just say float, and do we want these on the left side or the right side?
Left.
Cool. So we'll just do that. We'll say float left. And that was interesting. So basically now these are all in the same line. And additionally, like those, like before it took each like list item took up the entire like length of the screen basically. Now they're on the same line and they only take up as much space as they actually need. So when you float, what happens is you're taking the element out of the normal flow of the page. Like earlier we talked about how like elements want to go from top to bottom, left to right. That's not necessarily happening anymore. So this seems kind of straightforward, except now it's going to get a little bit weird. Let's put this back for a second. And let's actually add a style to our nav. Yeah, so I gave it nav class nav bar. And we'll just give it a background of, we'll go with that. Cool, so now they have this background. Let's go back and float these left again. Anybody want to take a guess what happened to the nav bar background? Like why it suddenly disappeared right there when we float left? It's not overwritten.
Did it also float left?
It doesn't. No, okay. So we can make it come back. Let's see. Yes, so this one's totally right. So it kind of collapsed. It's still there, but it collapsed. So this is kind of like what makes floats kind of interesting and like kind of weird to deal with. So if we inspect this and like we go to the nav, we see that the nav bar still has that background color. The problem is that the nav bar has no height all of a sudden. If we gave the nav bar like a fixed height, we can say like height, you know, that's too much, 100 pixels. Now we see it, but it's not behaving the way that like we want it to behave because like we want it to only like stretch to fill like what it needs to. So so basically what's happening is when we're floating, the nav bar isn't really like aware that there's anything inside of it. So it doesn't really like stretch to like fit its content. Like if we had, I don't know, we'll put in a couple of paragraphs of text. Oops. So like that nav bar that's blue, it stretches to fill whatever's inside of it. However, when we float, it's not really aware that there's anything inside of it because it's out of the flow of the page now. So there's a couple ways to get around this. I have like my favorite way, but like you can do whatever you want really. One way to do it is by adding a property called overflow and then setting it to auto. So what that does, what that CSS property does is it basically, it tells the element how to handle it when things go outside of it, like when its children go outside of its container, as is what's happening here. So when the li elements start popping out of that container, it like just automatically stretches to fit them. This is probably the easiest way to like clear floats, but there's a little bit like debate online about like whether this is like a good thing to do, because like there's like certain situations where like this wouldn't give you like what you want. The second way to do it would be to insert like a little, like add like a little div, and you can give it whatever class you want, but I'm just going to add a class of clearfix. And what we're going to do is we're going to say clear both. And we get the exact same result. So what the clear both property does is it's saying like, if I'm in a container and things are being floated, kind of reset the page now. Like stop all the floating, it stops right here. And when we do that, the nav bar knows that, all right, now I can like stretch a little bit farther. I can stop like right where this div is. I personally don't like this method because you're adding like an extra element to the page. So I would say if you had to choose between like this and doing like overflow auto is probably the better way because you don't have to add anything. And then there's like one final way where it's totally cool if I would say like you don't 100% understand like how this is happening, because you have like two other options available to you. But the other way would be to use a pseudo element. So a pseudo element is like basically just like an element that doesn't really exist, but you're inserting content like before or after an existing element on the page. So what that kind of looks like is, I'm going to do it on the UL. Let's see. Yeah, you could use Flexbox is actually like the best way right now of like positioning things, because you can say like you have a lot more control over like where things are put on the page. It's not super great to be using too much because any browser before like Internet Explorer 9 doesn't support it, which is like a pretty decent chunk still. By like next year or the year after, you'll be seeing it used everywhere though. Yeah, so the other way to do it is by using a pseudo element. So basically what that kind of looks like is this, which is some kind of weird syntax, but just kind of go with it for now. And I'll explain like what all of it does. And if you don't get it, it's still in that repo that like you guys all cloned, and like there's an explanation of that in there. And you still have the two other ways. So if you get like one way to clear floats, you don't have to worry about the rest. And yeah, I think that'll still work. Nope. UL after, spelled both wrong. Cool. So what that's actually doing, so what the after property does is it's saying like at the end of this element, it doesn't really mean like after the UL, but at the end of the UL, I want to insert like a almost like a virtual element that doesn't have a name basically. And inside, I want to add, it gives you an option to add some content. I don't want to add any content, but we could say like, hello world, and it'll insert that text into our after element. But basically what we're using it for is the same thing that we used the div for with the clearfix method, where basically we're turning that like new element that we're creating into a block level element. That basically that means it's going to stretch the entire width of the page, and we want to clear all the floats. If this part's confusing, like completely forget it. Overflow auto and clearfix both are two totally valid ways to do it. This is just like the third way that I thought I'd throw in there. So yeah, kind of coming back to here, we almost have a nav bar now, but like if we wanted to make that look a little bit better, let's see. Yeah, overflow is probably the easiest. Yeah, I would probably just use that. Like if that's easiest to remember and that feels easiest, just use that. Cool. So now we want to make our nav bar look a little bit more like a nav bar. We'll give it some padding. We'll say 10 pixels on all sides. We'll say 15 pixels. Cool, and that's looking a little bit better. We don't really want like this black border anymore. I just kind of added it so we could see like where things actually are. So I'm going to take that out. These guys are a little bit close together. What CSS property might I add if I want to like make these three LIs not so squished together? Any ideas? Let's see. Yep, margin. So we'll say margin, we'll start with 10 pixels maybe. That separated them out a bit. And you'll notice it kind of also had like the side effect of making the nav bar like a little bit bigger. So I mean, we could just decrease the padding, I suppose. Now that's swelled down a little bit more. I want to make these LIs. I want to make them look like buttons. Yeah, that totally works. So that's another good point. We don't have to do like margin in all directions. We can just do left and right, and then that'll take care of all that swelling, and then we'll put that back. I don't know if we need the border radius. When you added the padding earlier, it didn't look like it left inner space between the text and the border. Oh, the padding is okay. So the padding is not on the LIs here. It's on the nav bar. So like you want yeah. So if we put the padding on the LIs here, it'll kind of give it almost the same effect as we're doing with the margin right now, where we're like separating out like those these LI tags here. Like if we gave this like some ridiculous number, like 100 pixels, you can see how like to the left of the LIs, it's like more space. To the bottom, there's more space. To the right, I guess you can't really tell because it's that's like the side that there's nothing on, and the top as well. But yeah, so I want to make the LIs look a little bit more button-like, so I'm gonna give them a background color. Let's say white for now. And then I saw somebody mentioned like rounded corners. I like that idea. So we'll say like border radius I can't spell. 4 pixels. So now they're nice and round, but they're a little bit small. What's the easiest way for me to make these like almost nav buttons look a little bit bigger, but still kind of keep the text like in the center? Padding, yep, exactly. So then we'll just say padding, we'll say 10 pixels, see what that looks like. Cool. Yeah, so basically we made like a nav bar. We could also change the color of the text because it's just black right now. So we'll just say color, so like a light blue, too light. We'll say that the background isn't that, then we'll say the background is all right. Well, it's not super pretty, but does anybody know what CSS property I would add to the buttons if I wanted to make the cursor turn into like a little hand instead of like this, I don't even know what this is called, but does anybody know how I would make it into a little hand instead? And if you don't know what I mean, it's like when you hover over an actual button, or yes, exactly. Yeah, we'll do that after actually. Yeah, so we'll totally, yes, this is totally right. Awesome. So we'll do hover cursor. Actually, better way to do it, we'll say cursor pointer. Cool. So now it kind of looks like a button because like when we hover over it, it looks clickable. Does anybody know what we might do if we wanted to change the color of these buttons when we hover over them? Like if I wanted to, if when I hover over it, I want to make the background white. Whoops. Yep, exactly. Perfect. So we'll say we'll make the background white. And we'll just reverse that. We'll make the background white. That's not really reversing it, but. Does anybody have any questions about pseudo classes and like how that's actually like what's going on there? Or like what kind of things we can do with pseudo classes? Okay, so we'll go on to the next thing. So that was static positioning with floats. So we can float things either the left or the right, and they'll live on the same line. And one kind of side effect of that is whatever element is containing those floated elements isn't really aware of their existence. It just kind of like, it doesn't stretch to like fit them. You have to clear the floats either by doing overflow auto or using the clear fix div thing or using the, the pseudo element that we did. One of those methods either want to work, but that clearing the float kind of like brings everything back to like being in the flow of the page. Cool. Oh, and as far as like how, like what floats are used for primarily, they're used primarily for like laying out web pages. So for example, Bootstrap's grid. No problem. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, there's going to be like a document in the GitHub. It'll get updated. Cool. So yeah, as far as floats go, Bootstrap's grid, like all the columns are being floated, like under the hood. Like if you actually look at the code, they're all like being floated, and there's like a margin of like a certain percentage depending on like what column you chose. Cool. So now we're going to talk about display types. So we kind of already talked about one display type, which is a block level element. Not to be confused with with positioning. which the positioning type that we talked about so far was static. But most elements are block level elements. And what that means is they take up the entire width of the page. So I've given a border to like all of these H1 tags, all these H2 tags, all these P tags, basically to show you that even though like the text only comes this far, they want to take up the entire page. We can give block level elements a fixed width. So kind of just like what was done here. But if they're positioned statically, they still can't like cross pass other elements like we did in the first like demo earlier, or one of the first demos earlier. There's also inline elements, which are kind of like floats in a way. So like here I have like this anchor tag, and it's got like this blue border around it, but you'll notice it's on the same line as like this paragraph. It's on the same line as this text. That's because anchor tags, wherever they, yeah, I left it here. So anchor tags are inline elements. They're just a special type of element that they can be on the same line as other things. And they don't really like, they don't try to like hog up their entire line. Other examples of inline elements are spans. So like just like right here, I made this one bold, and I guess I gave it a border right there. So spans are also inline elements, so they can also live on their own line, and they're just for like transforming like a piece of text like inside a paragraph or something like that without like having to go to a new line. So inline elements, what's interesting is you remember before with the box how we could position it using like margin top, left, right, bottom, and padding, you know, top, left, right, bottom. Inline elements, so spans, anchor tags, strong tags, the I tag for like italicized, they can only be positioned with left and right, padding and margin. They ignore completely top and bottom. That's just what inline elements do. That they, by their name, they want to stay on the same line as everything else. And then there's another type called inline blocks. So we're going to go more into depth with this, but like inline blocks are kind of almost like a hybrid between like inline elements and block level elements. So an example of an inline block would be a button or an image. So those things, they can live on the same line as other elements, but they're similar to block level elements because you can use top, left, bottom, and right on them as well. So yeah, basically certain elements come a certain way, but you can change the positioning of any element to suit your needs, which we're going to get into. So now we're going to do an inline nav bar. So just another method of making the same nav bar that we made before, except this one's not using floats, it's using inline blocks. So basically what's going on, I'll actually just, yeah, I'll just start from scratch, I guess. So, that's interesting. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're kind of back to like the list being like this vertical list. We can make this list behave similar to how we made like the floats behave by turning them into inline block elements. So basically nav bar and then li. Cool. So similar to how like these spans here can live on the same lines, just because that's how spans are. They're inline elements. By turning the li tags into inline blocks, we can put them on the same line without floating. Except the benefit that inline blocks have over inline elements is we can use top, left, bottom, and right. So to position them rather. So like if I gave all these a padding of 40 pixels, it's probably too much. Yeah, if I did that, then it gets padding on all sides. But if I just made this inline, that padding only applies to left and right. So that's basically inline blocks. They're just like regular block elements, except they can live on the same line. They're like an alternative to floats. You will probably see them used more often than floats, actually, if you're using something like Bootstrap, because floats are better for like laying out how the page looks. Inline elements are better for like laying out other components. So like these buttons, I want on all the same row, basically. Cool. So I guess we can do like an exercise. Cool. I guess we can do like an exercise. So I'll put you guys into rooms, and then we'll make something. Yeah, we'll just do that real quick. So I'm gonna put everybody into breakout rooms. I don't have the GitHub address. It doesn't really matter for this next part, but I'll Slack it in the chat right after this. Cool. So I'm gonna put everybody into breakout rooms, and then basically what's gonna happen is there's gonna be one person coding, and everybody else will either direct that person or help them along. But what I'd like to see everybody try to do is to make like a nav bar, like a kind of like how we just did, but make two of them. So one using floats and one using inline blocks. And then I'll jump around and we'll take like 10 minutes and then we'll talk about it and make sure everybody gets it. And then we'll get into what absolute and relative positioning are about.
I don't even know if you can see or hear me. Oh. Huh? Oh, no. I always think it's like 5:30.
All right, cool.
Like in a group. So.
Yeah. I guess you're coding.
Where am I? I want to see. Can you see me or hear me, or am I the only one here?
I think you're the only one who's like active right now.
I'm at work.
Oh wow. Hey
there's
David.
someone on the chat.
David, do you
Cool,
want to code
sorry,
instead?
I'm only half participating because I'm wrapping up at work right now. But you want to do the inline elements? Can I, if I use Sublime, can I share that screen?
Yeah. There's a button at the bottom that says share screen.
Okay. So I gotta make a new file. That's what I'm working on. Thanks for doing this tutorial, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully it helps a couple people.
Yeah. Let's do H1. All
I'll
right.
be right back.
This
Just gonna
guy.
check out another room.
Yeah, no problem. Let me.
And what you did is just nav. Yep, there you go. And we could just give it a background color for now, so we can see where it is, and give it like a height so we can see what it looks like.
Cool. Who's gonna be coding? I feel like somebody's coding on their own. I hear the keyboard.
No, I've got like 20 things on my screen right now. I prefer not to.
Chris, is there something that we can go to start coding, or we have to start from scratch though?
Probably Scratch. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's really just 3 elements on the page. Really, it's the basic just HTML skeleton. It's the nav bar, like the nav element rather. A UL for an unordered list, and like 2 at least LI elements inside.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like if you can make like a nav bar using floats and inline blocks, you know everything you need to know about floats and inline blocks, basically.
Okay.
Cool. I'll check back. I'm gonna see how other people are doing. Who's coding?
I believe that would be us.
Cool.
So sorry, so we're trying to make 2 nav bars, 1 inline and 1 out of line was the assignment?
one using an inline block element for like the LIs, and then 1 using floats. So like 1 using floats, 1 using inline blocks. And if you don't really feel too confident with one, just make the other, and then like we'll just talk about after which one maybe gave people more trouble. So
Okay.
oh, and everybody should be helping you along. I'm gonna check in on another room, and I'll be back shortly.
Okay. So the next one, I think I'll try to use float. I don't know if that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Did you guys see the inline block one?
Yeah, we are already in the exercise 8.
Mm.
That's where
Is that what you want us to do?
I mean, I was kind of hoping like to do it from scratch with like your own colors and stuff, but I mean, as long as you get it, that's kind of the main point.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and then so this one I'll just try with the float. Okay.
Was there anything that was confusing about either floats or inline blocks?
No.
Okay. Yeah, floats I feel like are more are less obvious, but
yeah. Is there? I mean, would you say one way is better than the other?
I would say like when possible, it's probably better to use inline blocks on things than it is to use floats.
Okay.
The reason why is if you guys remember that thing with the nav bar where if we didn't clear it, it didn't realize it had anything inside, so it was like totally flat. That can be something that's a little bit tricky to like debug. Whereas inline blocks don't have that problem. However, floats are better if you need to like float something to the right. So like if I want the nav bar to be all the way on the right side of the screen, floating is like probably the best way to do that. But if it needs to be on the left, then probably inline blocks are better. Just because you can't inline block and then make something go all the way to the right without like margin. But on different screen sizes, you have to give it different amounts of margin, so that can become tricky.
Okay.
Hey, Chris.
What's up?
I've been seeing a lot of gulp lately being intertwined with CSS. Can we cover that tonight? Or is it?
We can. It depends. It's kind of like a big subject. We can, at best, if everyone's like feeling really good about everything, and nobody has any questions on anything, I could show you guys like Sass maybe.
Sass, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So Sass, usually Sass is like what you'll use gulp and CSS for. So Sass is basically just like another language that you'll write in that it looks just like CSS, except it has like some extra features. And what gulp will do is it'll turn that Sass code into regular CSS code, so that like your browser can use it. But gulp itself is kind of like a big subject. Yeah, I don't know, I'll like think about it, like how to maybe possibly do that like as we're going along and see if we can. If not, like I could show you something in class probably.
Okay, so it is an in thing right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I started to notice that on some of the sites.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's there's a lot right now with like front end like build tools, which we'll talk about in class later, but like basically similar to how Sass is like CSS with like extra features. It's like a different language, and then like gulp turns it into regular CSS so your browser can use it. There's like different versions of JavaScript that like you might want to write code in, but then you might use something like gulp to turn it into like regular JavaScript, so now everybody's browser can like see it.
Well, the other thing too, Sass costs money, doesn't it?
No, it's free. It's like open source. It's free.
Huh.
Yeah,
No
a lot
packages?
of tools for like developers are generally free.
Yeah, okay.
It's like services that will maybe cost something.
Okay.
Cool. I'm gonna check on some people I haven't checked on. Let's see. How's this going?
I think we're doing okay.
Cool. Was there anything that was like super confusing about either floats or inline blocks that I can clarify for you guys while we have a small group?
Yeah, inline blocks kind of went over my head.
Okay. So you know how like every word in a sentence it like is on its own line?
Yeah.
Inline blocks are like that for elements. So like if I have two inline blocks next to each other, they're on the same line. Is kind of what happens. So like so what we're gonna do with inline blocks in the context of like this navigation bar is the LIs are gonna be turned into inline blocks so that they'll like sit on the same line. There are very few elements that are inline blocks by default. The only one I can think of right now is like an image, where if I have an image and then I have some text like next to it, that text can sit on the same line as the image. So in the same way that floats like just put everything on the same line by saying like we don't care about the rest of the page, then inline blocks basically they put everything on the same line just in a different way where you don't have to like clear anything. It's actually easier than floats. Yeah, I don't know if that like helped or confused more.
Yeah,
Image.
that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, an image is an inline element, or inline block element rather. So if you have two images that are next to each other, and like the screen is big enough, they'll be on the same line. But if like one image is like, you know, much bigger than the other image, and like it can't really fit to have them both on the same line because of the screen size, it'll go down to the next line. Unlike a paragraph, where if you have a paragraph, it automatically jumps to the next line when you make another paragraph. So an image is an example of an inline block element. Difference between inline blocks and inline is inline elements, you can do, you can't do top and bottom for like margin and padding. So like if I have like an anchor tag, like a link, I can like move it to the left and to the right using margin or padding, but I can't move it to the top and bottom using margin or padding. So that's why inline blocks exist, because they can live on the same line as like other inline and inline block elements, but you can move them up and down. And I'm going to try to make, I figure I'm going to make like a chart or something to like add into the repo and Slack you guys, because this is like kind of a lot to remember.
Cool.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to check on some of these other guys, and then we will regroup, and I'll go over some more stuff, and then we'll do this again, and then we'll do something cooler, and then, yeah, maybe we'll have like a big project at the end. Cool. Cool, how's this going?
Well, Chris, we're having issue like for some reason, like if we actually gave it like a name, it's not selecting it from the CSS.
Okay.
Actually, I think we're supposed to just give it a space. I think what we're doing is saying it first, and then class and class.
Oh, okay, I see what's going on. So the dots are actually for classes, whereas it looks like you're using IDs.
So you just
make a space.
Oh, okay. So you put
So like if you wanted to use like an ID there, you'd replace the dot with like a octothorpe, the hashtag.
So just make a space between the LI. You have to give it a space.
Yeah, if you're talking about nesting element, yeah. So yeah, you give it a space. So
Take the dot out though. You're still calling it a class.
right, exactly. So like the space just means like all of the LIs that are inside of the ULs that are inside of the first.
So just take out the dot on first. So instead you're saying hashtag first UL space.
Yeah, I would take out all the dots actually that
Yeah.
you have going on, because it doesn't look like you're using any classes.
Right.
You're using all IDs.
And I guess I would take out the ID name in that one. Right?
Awesome. That looks really good. You made that without Bootstrap.
And now you want us to do the floater version, Chris? Okay. All right. Second.
No, it didn't do anything. Hi again.
Hi.
So we're on, go back. Okay, so I made two different nav barbs. The first one we have the float, and they're both essentially the same right now.
Sure.
And so I'm trying to see if the second one I can contribute. Hi there. Change it with it being just next to this other guy. I'm trying to go dot.
Yeah, that'll work.
But they look the same right now. Is there a way, Chris, that I can go through the flip between the Sublime and the browser, like have them both visible to everybody? Or do I have to keep clicking over share screen?
No, you can. Are you on a PC or a Mac?
I'm on a Mac.
Oh, are you on like one of the last 3 versions maybe?
I'm on a MacBook Pro.
No, I mean like for the, do you know what operating system you're running? Like which version?
Yeah, one of the later.
Okay.
The later.
You can have like two things on the same screen. If you like press and hold on like the green button for like Sublime text, like to maximize it, or like if you press and hold on that button, it'll let you drag it to either the left or right side of the screen, and then you can like bring something else. So like if you just press and hold that for a sec on the green button, yeah.
Get on full screen. I want to be.
Yeah. Don't. Yeah. Press it again once, and then, or I guess so we're not in full screen rather. Or okay, and then just like press and nope, not that one.
Not that one.
Yeah, if you press and hold on the green one for like 4 seconds or something without.
There it is. Okay.
Is it doing it? Okay.
And then here's this. I lost you guys though. Okay. Where's my meeting? There you are. Okay, let me see. New share. And that's not an option. All right, I'll just pass through the two because I don't want to spend all the time fussing with being tech stupid.
it's like a new.
Okay, so you can still see the Sublime.
I think all we see is Sublime.
Okay. So when I switch over to the Chrome browser.
All right, we'll wrap this up in like 2 more minutes.
Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, basically all the answers are like in the thing, so just good to get some practice with it.
New share. And all my stuff is gone.
Cool. Are we all back? Nope. Oh yeah, we are, I think. Okay. Okay, cool. I think everybody's back. So was there anything like anybody in particular got stuck on doing that like they would like to go over, or did it feel like maybe a more I have to review and practice kind of thing?
The clear fix would be great to go over.
Okay.
Just the concept.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go through the clear fix right before we go on to the next thing, which is using like a float to it'll make sense in the next thing. we're gonna use floats for something else, and then we're gonna like forget about floats for the rest of it. Cool. So I'll open this in my browser. Oh, I gotta share my screen again, don't I? Cool. Awesome. And does everybody actually see the web page? Because it's kind of weird when like I'm assuming so. So let's see. Okay, cool. Yeah, Zoom's kind of weird. Like when you share your screen and then you go to like a different like full screen window, it doesn't like seem like you're still sharing. But anyway, so as far as the clear fix thing, as far as like how all that works, let me actually take out this, and I'll take out. That's the only thing I'll take out actually. So easiest way to clear floats, because we floated the LIs left. Why is that still good? I have to like unbreak this, or break this rather. Oh, it's because I did overflow auto. Yeah, Robbie, this is the easiest way actually to clear floats, which I left in here and I forgot about it, is to do overflow auto. So if we take this out, we see we have like this weird thing going on where like the nav bar doesn't know how big it's supposed to be. But if we do overflow auto on the nav bar, or whatever like this container is that we need to be a certain size, which may not always be a nav bar, then it'll like automatically like stretch to like fit that content. So that's the easiest way. And if all you remember about clearing floats is overflow auto, you're good. Cool. So now let's go on to I'm debating if I want to do like one more floats thing, but I figure we'll go on to absolute positioning now. So I'm going to open this one. So absolute positioning is a little bit different than like static positioning. So static positioning is how everything on the entire page is if you don't change it. So not to confuse positioning with display types. So block element is a display type. Inline block is a display type. Static is a positioning type. Absolute is a position type. And it occurred to me, like as I was doing this, that this is like a lot to remember and a lot to get potentially confused. So I'm gonna make a chart and then upload it to the repo and then like let you guys know when that's all there, and you can just like pull from it or reclone it, and you'll have that basically letting you know what each thing is like classified as. But we'll talk about absolute positioning. So cool. So if an element is positioned absolutely, okay, so if an element's positioned absolutely, it's taken out of the flow of the page. So this is kind of similar to floats, where like when we floated those nav items to the left, other elements weren't really aware of it. It was like they weren't on the page and they behaved as though they weren't on the page, right? Absolute elements are kind of the same, except they don't even interact with each other. So a little bit different than static elements, we position them using top, left, bottom, and right. So this might seem better actually at a glance. So I'm only gonna have one box, and we're gonna get all that out of the way. Cool, so now I just have this one box and I'm gonna take that out. Okay, so right now this box is positioned absolutely. That means it's absolutely where I tell it to be. So if I say bottom 0, it's at the bottom of what seems like the page. If I say right 0, it's all the way to the bottom right of our web page. If I want it to be 200 pixels from the bottom, I can say 200 pixels, and it's still 0 pixels from the right, but now it's 200 pixels from the bottom. So that's kind of how absolutely positioned elements work. They are where you tell them to be. So like one question that I know I had when I first learned it was, well, why don't we just use absolute positioning all the time? This sounds awesome. Like I can just say where I want something to be and it'll be there. I don't have to like float things. I don't have to, do this or that. So the answer to like why that's not super great, I'll show you right now. And I'm just gonna add another box and we'll give it a red background. Oops. Okay, and then we'll put that back. Cool. So you'll notice the red box kind of disappeared under the purple box there. Let's give that a top of 100. So absolutely positioned elements, they go over other elements, and they don't really care about what's going on the rest of the page, and other parts of the page don't really care what's going on with them. So basically that can create a problem if I want like an element to be positioned in relation to another element. Like if you remember in the navbar example, we had like those LIs that they were maybe a certain distance apart from each other using padding. You can't really do that with absolute elements. So like that kind of begs the question, all right, what do we use absolute elements for then if like, they can't really interact with other elements? For the most part, you'd use them for things like footers, things that have to be like always at the bottom of the page, for example. Or maybe things that have to be like always like in a certain spot in relation to like something else. So like I'm going to, just to kind of like demo this a little bit further, just uncomment all of this if I can. Yes, exactly. So you could use absolute positioning to make a page footer. There's slightly more to it than that, but like if you get the concept of absolute positioning puts things where you tell them to be, then you already know like most of like what you need to know to make like a footer or something similar. The other thing that absolutely positioned elements have that other elements don't have is you can give them a z-index, meaning you can put them like on top of other elements. So right now, why does that keep opening? Yeah, so right now I have 4 boxes here and they're all on top of each other. And I guess box 4 is on top because that was like the last one. But I can say z index 10. Okay. And now the purple one's on top. I can give box 2 a z index of 11. Now that one's on top. So z-index only works for elements that are positioned in some way, whether that's absolute, relative, or fixed. And it talks about like the depth that element is at. So an element that has a higher z-index goes in front of elements that have a lower z-index. By default, absolutely positioned elements are positioned relative to your browser window. And not so much like any other element on the page. You can change that though. And I guess what I mean by like their position relative to the browser window is I can say bottom 0 for box 1, and it's at the bottom of the page, right? But if I make the page smaller, then it kind of moves with that. So that's not always like what you want. Like in the case of like, say you have like a footer, like I still want to be able to like read the content. I just, you know, want my footer, I want to have to like scroll is kind of like what's going on. So that's something we'll come back to. And we'll come back to that after explaining relative position rather. So that was absolute. Things are where you put them. They're relative to your browser window. They don't care about other elements on the page. And then inside all of these, I have like a README kind of summarizing like what I just said. But yeah, let's take a look at relative positioning now. Cool. So I don't know if anybody remembers this from like the first homework. There was like one part where you had like a card, and then it had like a caption kind of thing that had to like go at the bottom. And there's actually like a part with like an image here, which I'll like fill in now. But basically, you can use a combination of relative positioning and absolute positioning in order to like make things like this. So this caption part is at the bottom of this card. And it sits at the bottom of the card always, no matter how big big or small the card gets. So like if I say the card is 650 pixels, it's at the bottom. That's kind of how a footer would work actually, except like this card would be like your entire web page. So like, I'll kind of show you how that works. So what's happening? This should be relative actually. Okay. So let's talk about relatively positioned elements before like I talk about how that affects absolute elements. So a relatively positioned element will behave the exact same way as a block level element in that like I can give it margin, I can give it padding, and other elements on the page like bump into it and kind of get moved by it. But if I put an absolute element inside of a relative element, then that bottom 0 becomes the bottom of that relative element, not like the web page. That left 0 becomes like all the way to the left of that relative element, not the web page. Same thing for like all the other sides. So if we wanted to, we could put this caption up at the top by saying like top 0. And it'd basically be the same thing really. So that was, I mean, that was absolutely positioned elements. I can, I'm kind of like debating on whether we jump to footers or break out into an activity. I think I'm going to show you how to make a simple footer and then we'll do an activity on that. Cool. So I added in like all this text to kind of like make a point that this footer sticks to the bottom no matter what. So like even if there is no like text here, like if there's no content, like I feel like people have probably made footers before, and if there wasn't enough like stuff on the page, it didn't stick to the bottom. This will, even if there's like nothing on the page. So the way that that kind of works is we have like a div that contains basically everything, and I gave it a class of wrapper. So what's going on is that wrapper is relatively positioned exactly the same as that card is right here. And then the footer is positioned absolutely at the bottom, exactly the same as the caption is inside this card. So the only other thing that kind of has to happen for this to work is the HTML and the body have to have a height of 100%. Why that matters is kind of interesting. because, whoops, not this one. Yeah, why that happens is kind of interesting because you remember how like floats, they other elements on the page like don't pay attention to them, how we had to like clear the floats before because like its parent container didn't really realize it was there. The same thing kind of happens with like absolute positioned things. So we have to like manually make the HTML element and the body element 100% height. So now like it has like this red outline. So now the footer is at the bottom of the like HTML, it's at the bottom of the body. So really there's like probably 3 things going on here to like make this happen. And like footers seem kind of hard, but they're super easy. We have to make the HTML and the body 100% height. We have to use a wrapper. That's a great question. So when is it appropriate to use percent versus pixels? So the reason that we use percent here is because I need the HTML and the body to be the height of the screen, basically. So if I don't know the height of your screen, like at home, I'd have a hard time like giving like a specific like pixel value for it. But if I used 100%, then that just means like, okay, whatever size its parent is, make it that size. Usually pixels are better for things like, usually they're better for things that are maybe not in relation to the page. Like if I need something that takes up half the space of the page at all times on all screen sizes, I'd probably use percentages instead of pixels. But if I needed to like give like my nav bar list items like some extra padding, I'd probably use pixels. And even if you're on a smaller size screen, like it'll try to figure out like, all right, on a big size screen it looks like this. On a small size screen it should look something like this. Like mobile browsers now are like smart enough where if you give it pixels, it won't look completely awful. So yeah, there's like 3 things going on. We give the body and the HTML a height of 100%. We're using a wrapper container that holds everything. So this wrapper holds the footer. This wrapper holds like any content that might go inside. And then like the third thing that's going on is, I guess there's 4 things. Sorry. We give the wrapper a relative position. So in the exact same way that this card here is positioned relatively, and any absolute item inside of it goes to the bottom basically of the card, not the screen. That's why we did that to the wrapper. So we're saying like, when the footer goes to the bottom, I want it to go to the bottom of the wrapper. And the reason we want it to go to the bottom of the wrapper is because the wrapper will stretch as we add more content. So like that's what this min height is about. So at all times, the wrapper will be this at least the size of the screen, meaning this like white space will be at least the size of the screen. So if we like resize this, it'll be at least that size. And then the footer is absolutely positioned at the bottom of the that wrapper container. Other than that, there's not too much going on. What's a good idea is to give like whatever you're putting your content in my case, I had it inside like this main container. We'll say, so I have like this main container, and to prevent like our content from going into the footer, I gave it some padding. So basically there's always going to be 150 pixels between the content and technically the bottom of the page, where if we don't have that, that happens. which we probably don't want. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put us in the breakout rooms, and then maybe we'll have time to wrap up with like a bootstrap thing, or we can just like spend time answering whatever. So the goal of this activity is to create a footer. It has to stick to the bottom of the page, and throw a nav bar up at the top. No problem. So that will start. Robbie, do you want to code this time?
He's muted. Unmute.
I don't know if he's talking.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Sure.
You want to try coding this time, Robbie?
I don't mind. Sure.
Cool.
I'm just crashing out.
I hear you. Yeah, man, me too.
I don't know what's going on tonight. Hang on. You're gone again.
Having some computer issues? Cool.
No, you guys keep going in and out.
I won't move.
What?
Do you have headphones on?
No, it's not the problem. It's the connection for some reason.
Mm. So yeah, do you think you could create like another HTML page, or actually even just keep the same HTML page, and then just like add like a new CSS file where like you add the CSS needed to make the footer stick at the bottom?
You want me to copy this file?
No, you could just in the HTML file for inside footers,
Mm-hmm.
you could just comment out, or actually just go up, change style.css to style2.css, and then make a style2 CSS file, and see if you can add code to make the footer stick at the bottom. But before you do that, it might be a good idea to see what happened to the actual page after we took out style. Go all the way down? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's exactly like what was supposed to happen.
Okay.
So basically we don't have any CSS now. So maybe the first thing you could try to do is give the footer like a background color so we could actually see it.
Well, first I should change this.
Oh, no, just make a new file.
Oh, okay, you want to make a new file. Okay.
Yeah, call it style2.
Not spelled correctly.
You need the E. There you go.
Cool. So yeah, maybe the first thing you want to try to do is give the footer a background color so that we can see what it looks like. Whatever color you want. Cool.
No, I don't need to. Yeah.
Yeah, the color doesn't really matter. It's just we just want to see it on the page. Because right now it's like invisible because there's no color. Cool.
Right there.
So it looks like it's kind of working, but if you go to the index.html part and you get rid of all of the hello worlds.
Why don't we just put a blank in here?
Oh no, get rid of all the paragraph tags, because those will like make it go down. It'll do like a line break each time. I only added it to show how like no matter how big the page is, the footer is still at the bottom. Cool. But now if you look at the page inside Chrome, it should not be stuck to the bottom anymore. Yeah.
Well, it's because you haven't defined the top.
What's that?
You haven't defined the top.
What do you mean?
No, because the only thing really on the page is here.
Right, yeah. But like the point of like a footer is it has to be at the bottom of the page, no matter if we have a little bit of content or a lot of content.
Right.
So we can do that using a combination of relative and absolute positioning. So do you remember what we do to make something position to the bottom of the page or position to the bottom of the screen?
We want to position the wrapper so that it's relative, and then the footer is going to have different positioning. It's going to be absolute in relation to the wrapper, so it's telling it where to go.
Yes, that sounds right. But if you want to, like even before that, you could just give the footer a position absolute and then bottom 0. It won't work the way that like we think it will right away, but it's like a good start. So if you want it to be 0 pixels from the bottom, what do you write?
You're up.
So there's a top left, bottom right.
So it'll be at the bottom there.
Yeah, exactly. Bottom
0.
Exactly. So that's basically saying like from the bottom, I want it to be 0 pixels.
Like that, right?
Yeah, try it out. Cool. That seems like it works. However, if you actually go back to the HTML page and then you like do like Command Z. Actually, I guess it doesn't really work here because we left. But
Control Z?
Yeah, or Command Z. Okay, cool. Now save, and things will look kind of weird.
Yeah, because
Yeah. So the reason that's happening is because when you have a absolutely positioned element and it's not inside of like a relative container or another absolutely positioned element, it's positioned relative to like your screen dimensions. So that's why like it seems to stop like right there on the fold, because it's at the bottom of like where the fold is. No, you're close. You're close.
No, I just wanted to see what would happen.
Oh, nothing different. So what we have to do is we have to put the footer inside of a container that's relative. Yep.
There you go.
You wanted to put it in the container?
Yeah, you remember the if you look at the HTML,
like the dot card?
Oh no,
yeah,
that was like a different exercise. But if you look at the HTML,
I pulled up the wrong screen.
That's
Go
cool.
ahead.
If you look at the HTML page for this like site that you're running right now, go a little bit, actually all the way up. You see how we have like a div with the class of wrapper? If you add CSS to the wrapper to make it relatively positioned, we'll be a little bit closer. Because you remember the card was relatively positioned and the footer was at the bottom of the relatively positioned card. So we want to create that same effect again. Cool. So we just have to make it relatively positioned. And really what relative positioning is pretty much almost always used for is this kind of thing. Like I want to make the absolute children relative to this container. Cool, that goes all the way to the bottom now, it seems like.
Yeah.
Cool, so we're a lot closer. I think you can probably make the footer simpler than the way I made it So the only thing that's happening now though is actually, can you go back and try to like resize your screen a little bit? Like if you drag the edge of your Chrome window so it's smaller and then scroll down, does it do anything weird? No, I mean like scroll down on the page while it's smaller. Okay, cool.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah, so yeah, that's actually fine. Cool. So we're really just missing like one piece now. And that one piece is we have to put some space between the content and the footer. So you see how like the hello worlds are going inside of the footer? Exactly. So we have to give it some padding. So what we have to do is if you look at the HTML file, there's like a main element right there. We have to give main some bottom padding. The reason that we do it to main and not to the footer is because the footer is positioned absolutely, it doesn't affect anything else on the page. So any like margin or padding you give to that footer is not going to be paid attention to by anything else. You can go to the CSS. So you want to give main some bottom padding. Or some padding bottom. No, that'll work because he gave it the class of main, so it's the same thing.
Give it a 0, or would this be a relative?
So normally what we would do is we would give the footer like a fixed height or like a minimum height. And then we'd give the main a padding bottom that's the same thing. But you could try like 200 pixels and see what that looks like. Or try 150 actually is probably better. So basically what that's saying is at all times, there's going to be a 150 pixel space between the bottom of the content and like not the bottom of not the top of the footer, but the bottom of the page. So if you try to shrink your screen like from left to right, no, just left to right. Basically what we'd want to check is like on a phone size screen that still looks okay. So like if you give it like, if you shrink it so it's like the smallest width that it can possibly be. Yeah, so you see what's happening there is as the basically as that content in the footer is getting more squished together, it's getting taller. So really there's a couple ways to get around that, but the easiest way is to like use a media query. At least in this situation, there's like another footer example I have that's like not doing that. But you basically have it. So that's always going to stick to the bottom of the page. You put it in the wrapper that's relatively positioned. It doesn't matter how much content you have in there or how little content you have in there. It should stick to the bottom of the page. So that's like the simplest way that you can make a footer.
So do a padding bottom?
You don't really have to do anything else really. If you want to make it like a little bit more responsive, you could add like a media query. I don't know if you remember that at all. But you probably do that like very last thing at the bottom.
Down here?
Yeah. Basically what we'd want to do is at smaller screen sizes. We just
no, I know what you mean by media query. It's like you set it for an iPhone or something like
right, yeah. So
at media.
Yeah, you could try like
and then
you could do basically just put, well, you have to like do a little bit more. You have to like put like parentheses after the word media. And then you type in max width, max dash width. Yep. And then we'll say 480 pixels.
I'm gonna do 500. Okay.
Sure, whatever. And then you got to do the curly braces, like you know how like you have well outside of it. You know how like you have like a function, it has like those curly braces. Yep. And then inside there, we have to give the main more padding at the bottom. So we don't have to do anything with the wrapper, but like if you copy, yep, and then paste that inside, and then maybe give it like 300 pixels padding. Cool. And then if you save and then run that, you might have to like play around with like the exact like breakpoint. Yeah, so that seems like
Gotcha.
that works, but it looks like it's too much padding. So maybe you do like 200 or something, and then we're probably good. It needs the extra padding because we have, whenever something's absolutely positioned, other content kind of goes through it. So that's basically what's happening is like on smaller screen sizes, and I did this on purpose where I put a bunch of text inside the footer. On smaller screen sizes, the footer gets taller because there's like all this like stuff inside. So if we want to avoid like the text like going inside the footer, because absolutely positioned elements are out of the flow of the page, like other things pass through them, they pass through other things. So I have room. Yep, exactly, perfect. So basically, we're kind of giving it like extra. We're stretching out the like the wrapper, the container that it's in, so that like even though like stuff will go through it, we have like this extra cushion where we're never gonna touch it. Really, it's almost like a hack. It feels like because we're not actually saying we want this much padding from the top of the footer. We're saying we want this much padding from like the bottom of the page is kind of what's going on. Cool. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna bring us all back and then answer any questions, and then I don't know, maybe we can do something with Bootstrap to wrap up or whatever.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
There was nobody in my breakout room though, so I was just working on myself and I came back.
Oh wow, I'm sorry about that. I thought I had everybody like paired with people. How'd you do?
That's fine. That's fine. No problem.
How'd you do with the footer? Were you able?
Zoom is not working right tonight for some reason.
Yeah.
We were sort of able to get it to work. We had like some space in the bottom. I don't know why, but
Oh yeah. So, I'll like review that because that's the most confusing part, really.
Do we have to put like a margin in the body or something for that, or?
Close. So like, if you look at the example that I had, there was like a wrapper class, and that had a it might have been the wrapper, it might have been main. Let me double check.
Oh yeah, we didn't do the main one. We only use your wrap. I don't remember the wrapper part because you have to have a position connecting to it, right? Absolute the position between the footer.
Exactly, yeah. But if you look at the CSS for like the footer simple example, the main like element has like a padding bottom there. Oh, you were saying you had some space between like the bottom of the footer and the bottom of the page?
Yeah, because it's still sticking to the bottom. We just have like some space to the very bottom. I was wondering like.
Oh, I gotcha. So yeah, it has to go inside the wrapper, and the wrapper has to be relatively positioned, and the wrapper needs either a height of 100% or a minimum height of 100%. Like if you check that out. I had two footer examples. One is like easier. So I would like dissect that and like try to see how that works. The other one is footer responsive, where that one it'll work on any size screen or any size device, and you don't have to like use media queries. Whereas with like the simple footer, if there's a lot of stuff inside of the like if there's a lot of stuff in the footer, like you'll go on a website sometimes and there's like a whole like, you know, contact us or like almost like a navigation kind of thing inside the footer sometimes, like a sitemap. On smaller screen sizes, what will happen is that footer will get taller and it'll start eating up your content.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, I like wrote like step-by-step notes inside there on how to like do it. I didn't tell you guys that beforehand because, but whatever.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't have too much left. I mean, I feel like fixed positioning is something that's like a little bit obvious after all of this. Like fixed positioning is the one where like it scrolls with you. And that's kind of all there is to that. That works exactly the same way as absolute positioning does, where like it is where you tell it to be, except it scrolls with like the window as like you scroll the page. I mean, we can do like bootstrap columns like before like we wrap everything up, or I can like review something that we did earlier that was confusing that maybe somebody wants help with. But the bootstrap thing I feel like is like, if anybody's confused with Bootstrap, it's like the one thing you have to understand with Bootstrap, and then the rest is easy.
And you said you're gonna update the solution later on the, what do you call that, on the GitHub, right?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna push up like there are like a couple of like questions that we asked at the beginning where I'm gonna like upload the answers to those. And then probably by tomorrow, because I thought of this actually as we were doing this, is having like a chart of like different position types and different display types. So that's going to be in there. So I can just like Slack everybody in the Gitter when that's like updated. But within like 10 minutes after it's all like heading out, I'll have a couple extra things uploaded, and then by tomorrow I'll have like more things in there.
Cool.
Anybody interested in Bootstrap or not so much? Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, cool. Bootstrap, please. Cool. Yeah, I feel like there's like really one thing you have to understand with Bootstrap, and that's kind of it, because there's so much like copy and paste from like the Bootstrap website. So I'll share my screen again. And cool, that looks like that worked. I'm gonna close a few of these.
I have a quick question, really quick.
Yeah.
Regarding the comparison chart that you're going to be sending.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be based on different alignment or things that we can use? Is that what you were mentioning?
Yeah, so it'll be like because like we talked about like two concepts that sound very, very similar, and that was display types and position types.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm thinking of right now with this chart, it should be like it'll break down what's what, and then like what are the rules for that thing. So like with absolute positioning, you position it with top left, bottom right. Other elements on the page, ignore it. Yeah, stuff like that, like bite-sized, like a cheat sheet kind of thing.
Oh, that's great.
So, oh yeah, hopefully if it's done well, it'll be something where like you're trying to like move something on your page with HTML and CSS, and you're like, I don't really know like the best thing to use. You can like refer to this, and then it'll hopefully help you in the right direction.
Okay, great, thanks.
Not a problem. So yeah, with Bootstrap, there's really like one thing you have to understand, and then the rest is copy and paste. So like the one thing you kind of have to understand is there are containers, there are rows, and there are columns. So every row is made up of at most 12 columns. If you have more than 12 columns in a row, it just kind of skips to the next line and continues. So I'm a size 12 column. I'm the only column in my row. I stretch the entire width, and I keep going. If I want to have something take up half the page, then you just use a size 6 column and a size 6 column. So I'm a size 6 column. I take up half a 12 column row. Columns still need to be the same size. Here we have a size 8. They just need to fill 12 columns or less. I'm a size 4. And what I mean by less is we can leave some of the columns out, and we have like the 6 column here, but we have nothing on the right side here because we have a row with only 6 columns inside. And you can offset columns. So if you want like the first 6 columns to be empty, and then the last 6 columns to like have stuff inside. There's like an offset column class. But really there's, I guess, 4 important things to remember. So columns go inside rows. So the hierarchy should be container. Container holds rows. Then rows hold columns. And columns hold your stuff, basically. Only 12 columns or less per row. Rows go inside containers. So if you ever find yourself making a column and you don't have a row, you're not doing it right. If you ever find yourself making a row and you don't have a container, also not doing it right. So it's just in that order. And the reason why is because part of how Bootstrap is like responsive is it expects things to kind of be put in that order. There's like some default like margin and padding that like every column inside a container has that make things like look the way they're supposed to look. And then the last thing is not to try to change the actual grid. So like if you all of a sudden want to add CSS to make like a particular row like taller than all the other rows, what you want to do is you want to add another class. So like if I wanted to make this row taller, I would do something like that. I wouldn't go ahead and modify the actual row and give it a height. Because if I did that, that's actually not so great. We'll say 10 pixels. I mean, it still kind of looks like it's okay in this example because it's just text. But basically modifying the actual like row element or modifying the actual container class, it affects everything you'll ever use Bootstrap for in the future. So it's better to, or actually this is a better example. Yeah, so if I only wanted that one row to have like a red border, I wouldn't do this. I would add another class to it. And oh, these are empty for some reason. Oh no. Yeah, I had like half an exercise in here, and then I had like the solution-ish in there. So this is kind of confusing, but I'll fix it in the repo. But yeah, that was like the last rule. So rows and containers, columns and rows, and don't change the actual Bootstrap classes. If you want to make something a little bit different, add another class on and then make that class different. This was like one exercise that was kind of cool. This was like one exercise that was done in class early on, where you had to, you had to like basically make like a page layout that looks like this using Bootstrap classes. I'll do that real quick and kind of show you what I mean by the whole column container thing. So I have a container, maybe I have a header somewhere. Header has an H1. I think it just said header in the picture. I'm kind of already doing it wrong because I did not use any rows or columns, so I'll fix that. So most of the time, we're just going to be using like medium-sized columns, just because like if you're on your computer, that's pretty much what it's going to use. If you're on a phone, it'll be like small or extra small. If you're on like a big screen like desktop, it might be like large. But I usually like to start with medium just so I can see what it'll look like on my laptop. And then just copy and paste. It looks like the next thing had 1, 2, 3, and then it looks like there could be a fourth one there. It's just empty. So it looks like it's a 3 column, a 3 column, a 3 column, and a empty space because they have to add up to 12. So we'll do column D3. It's going to be a paragraph. Cool. That's looking very similar. And then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 12 divided by 6 is 2, meaning that these are all 2 columns if they're all the same size. So just switch that. And that's looking very similar. And then this is the same width as this one here on this row. And by row, I just kind of mean like, you can tell like what's a row and what's not because they all start at the same line by default. So we just have like a 2 column there and my row starts here. Oops, what did I do wrong? Cool. And then I had like another thing with this. So what's interesting about like the Bootstrap columns that's kind of confusing at first as well is you can add multiple column sizes to the same like column basically. So I think this is like the last row. Yeah. So in the last row, we have call XS3, call SM6, and call MD12. That means that on a medium-sized screen, it's going to be full wide. On a small size screen, it's going to be half wide. And on an extra small screen, it'll be, I guess, 25% of the screen size. Oops. So if I were to resize this, so the that seems kind of confusing because like we have multiple size columns on the same one, but the appropriate column size kicks in at the appropriate screen size. So you don't really have to like worry about that. So to an extent, like a lot of because of Bootstrap, like you don't really have to like worry too much about like floats. You'll probably still have to do like relative and absolute positioning, and you'll still have to do like inline blocks, but floats you'll do a lot less of. And part of that is because the way that Bootstrap's columns work is they're using floats under the hood to actually, like, these are all like being floated left, basically. And they're all being like cleared. But you don't have to worry about that because Bootstrap did that for you already. Was there something specific with Bootstrap anybody wants to go over?
I had a question regarding making changes to Bootstrap. You said just to add an additional ID to the existing or class.
Yeah, ID or class.
CSS.
Correct. Yeah. So like for example, I have these columns here, which are like these red columns. If I wanted the first one to have black text, I would probably do something like this. And then it seems, maybe it seems obvious, maybe it doesn't, but That is because, okay, that's because I have like this box, which is the actual thing, but let's say I had this too. Okay. And we'll make it green. Yeah. So I would probably add another class onto the same element or another ID onto the same element rather than change, say, for example, like call XS3. So like if we did this, like I wanted to say like, whoops. Like that'll still seemingly work, but then like if I needed, this is like a terrible example, but like if I still then needed to have like so I only really want like this one to like be green, but because now that I've modified like the actual Bootstrap class, that's going to affect it everywhere that I use it. So generally, like generally you wouldn't change like the actual Bootstrap classes. You'd add extra classes and IDs on top of it.
Okay.
Just because otherwise, like you'll forget like you did like something, and then like later you're like, oh, why doesn't this like go where I want it to go? It's because like in the contact page, you made like the rows this way when you only really wanted to affect that one row at that one place.
Okay, and my other question is, in the event that, you know how Bootstrap upgrades,
yep.
How would you recommend like styling, I don't know, like if you did some custom styles, but then it upgraded and it changes some of the look of what you had originally, what would you recommend doing at that point?
That's a really good question. So pretty much any way that you could include Bootstrap, so whether you're using the CDN or whether you downloaded Bootstrap and you have it like on your machine and you're like linking to it, you're always using that specific version that you started with. So like if I went and grabbed the Bootstrap CDN right now, it's kind of like a two-part answer, I'm guessing, but let me answer the first part first. Yeah, so pretty much if you're using a CDN, it'll always have like the version number. So like even if Bootstrap like 4 comes out, which it's supposedly pretty close, but I've been hearing that for like 2 years. Even if it comes out, you're not automatically going to get upgraded. You're still going to be using like Bootstrap 3.3.7, which is totally fine because like really most like companies won't like jump on like the newest thing like right away. Like they'll wait a while and like slowly like transition into it. So that part is generally not a problem. Like you're never going to be upgraded without like wanting to be upgraded.
Okay.
And then I guess like the other part to that is for the most part, there's not going to be any changes that affect like how you do things in like these like mini like, okay, so like the third, or I guess the second point, like the 0.7, the next update might be like 0.8. That's not going to change anything in any of the way that you do anything. Then 0.9 is not going to change anything in the way that you do anything. 3.4 might, but it might not. What definitely will be when it goes to 4, because then that basically means that like this is like no longer like backwards compatible with the old like big version basically. So I guess like if you ever did want to upgrade to Bootstrap 4, like if that, you know, came out, it's like you can use it, but it's not like finished yet is what they say. But if that came out and you wanted to use it, you'd pretty much have to like change everything like one piece at a time basically, which would be kind of a pain.
So everything that I had altered, I would have to go back and remove.
Right. I mean, some of it you might not have to. It really depends on like what it is. and like which components, like maybe like you've updated. Like it's possible that like if you did something where you want your nav bars on like your site to be a particular way, and then you upgrade to Bootstrap 4, it's possible that there might not be any like real breaking changes in the nav bar, but maybe there are in like the drop downs. So it probably wouldn't like mess with everything, but it'd be a pain. Like you'd have to like go through and like change things.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen too often though. Like I said, they've been saying like it's almost out for like 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's soon though. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
No problem. Anybody else have any Bootstrap questions or questions on anything? Life? Okay, I think.
Hey, Christian.
What's up, Greg?
So I'm sure I speak for everybody. This was fantastic. I mean, you're an awesome teacher, and this review was just great. So thank you so much for your time. And everybody, there will be a recording posted in within 48 hours on YouTube, and I'll get the link to everybody's SSM. So sometime Tuesday for sure. It might be up by tomorrow also. So have a great night, and thanks for coming. Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Later. Enjoy your night, everyone.
Later.